Hi friends, welcome back to the Scapegoat Club. In this video I'm going to talk about guilt. Guilt around family estrangement and whether that guilt is healthy or unhealthy. Stay tuned. Hi friends, thank you so much for being here. So let's dive into this idea around guilt and family estrangement. So family estrangement can look like a lot of different things. It can have a lot of different reasons why it happens. And so in this video I'm really concentrating on the scapegoat role and the narcissistic family unit type dynamic. Basically that situation where you have a person who is empathetic, who is kind, who really tries to understand, might be the peacemaker, someone potentially more vulnerable who ends up basically being controlled and being blamed for things we haven't done. So for a lot of us, we've been basically assigned to sit in the guilty seat from day one. That's our job in the family unit. The other members need to control, need to have us do things for them to make up for areas in their life where they're lacking. Our job is often to really be a servant towards what they need. And one of the tools that they use to keep us in this role is guilt. Guilt's a very effective tool at getting into our heads and making sure that we do what they say, even when they're not around. And we can become so good at feeling guilty that it's almost like our default setting, or one of our default settings. If we're not scared and if we're not anxious, we could just feel guilty. So we can feel guilty about any number of things. We can obviously feel very guilty when someone tells us that we haven't done something that they wanted, when we need to say no to them, when we've let them down. That can continue into any time we do something for ourselves, any time we stand up for ourselves, any time we think about doing something for ourselves. We can start feeling guilty straight away. We can even feel guilty when we're supporting other people, but not the narcissistic or the really controlling people in our lives. If we're doing something for our own children, for our own families, for work, for volunteering, we can be doing things that are very selfless and supporting other people. But if we're not supporting those key people in our lives, the narcissistic people, the people that want us to feed them, we can still be made to feel guilty. And so let's just take a pause and think about guilt. Because guilt is actually a very useful emotion. It can be there, or it's designed to be there in a healthy way, to tell us when we've violated our own personal standards. It gives us a kind of reality check on what behavior we think is right and what behavior we think isn't right. So let's just think about that for a second. Our problem can come in when that personal standard is something that we've learned from other people, or it's a personal standard that we've had instilled in us from someone who has basically an ulterior motive. They have their own agenda. If someone wants us to feel guilty when we're not doing something for them, then we kind of start moving into this unhealthy guilt area. So whilst guilt is useful because it guides us towards healthy behavior, unhealthy guilt can cause us to be stuck. And it often comes from a place of fear. Basically, we do things out of this guilt to avoid the fear or to avoid these really difficult feelings that we get around this guilt. So it's incredibly powerful when we can start to see that perhaps the guilt we're feeling isn't this healthy guilt, but it's unhealthy, and that it's coming from, it stems from us having these personal standards that are either not true to us, they actually belong to someone else, they're not true, or they're not fair. And this can really come into play into the estrangement dynamic when we realize that we are dealing with, we can often have really double standards in our families. And when we realize that what's okay for one person in our family is not okay for us, or what's okay for a lot of people in our family isn't okay for ourselves. For example, self-care, looking after ourselves. I think it's very common that we can have people in our lives who are very fragile, who need other people to work around their schedule or to accommodate their own specific needs or beliefs. But are we allowed the same kind of fragility, or any kind of fragility? Very rare. In fact, we might not be allowed to have any thoughts, any feelings. We might never allowed to be ill. We might never be allowed to have an off day or be tired. That's when we end up in this situation of trying to deal with double standards, and we can't keep up with them, and eventually something has to give. And that can lead us, sadly, unfortunately, to estrangement. And then we can end up dealing with guilt when we've estranged. So if this sounds really familiar and you think it's something that you're dealing with, I have a few ideas that I think will help. The first one is, which you've done already, is recognizing that you might be dealing with an unhealthy guilt situation rather than a healthy guilt situation. And as soon as we can see that, we can start to apply some logic and apply some rational thinking about what we're dealing with. And if you're not sure, I would use that kind of other person test. Do you think if someone told you about this thing, do you think they should feel guilty? If it was a best friend or one of your kids, do you think they should be feeling guilty about that or not? And apply that same logic to you. Is it something that you think that a normal person should feel guilty about? Odds are that if you don't, then you could be dealing with this unhealthy guilt. So the second step to really overcoming and unwinding this guilt is to really, truly accept ourselves. To look at ourselves and see that, no, of course we're not perfect, but nobody's perfect. And also we can be imperfect and not feel guilty about it. Because really when we continue to blame ourselves and to shame ourselves and to live in that guilt complex, we don't move on, we don't move out of it, and we can actually be really trapped and become our own worst enemies and our own critics. So accepting ourselves and forgiving ourselves is key. So if you're still finding yourself stuck in this guilt and really struggling to forgive yourself, a great way to move on is to confess. And often this is the worst thing we can think about. It's the last thing we want to do is we want to bare our dirty secrets and our souls to people. But honestly, it is so relieving. It can bring a weight off our chest, because I would put a lot of money on so many of the things that we feel guilty about aren't worth it. And if we share it, or when we share it with a friend, with a supportive co-worker, with a therapist, or with a doctor, you can call me. We can talk about it together. I do offer one-on-one coaching now, and I'm more than happy to give a third-party opinion. But getting that unbiased opinion on, is this something I should feel guilty about? Or am I this terrible person? Or am I really just living my best life, doing my best? A fallible human being, I don't always make the right mistakes, but really I've got some very difficult people in my life who want to keep me in the box that they need me in to be able to continue their life in the way that they want it to be. So please, if you can, talk to somebody, unburden, and I'm going to say I really think it will. I would put so much money on the fact that it will help and you will find it useful. So then really we kind of have a choice, because guilt can really keep us trapped, or we can try and work through it and move on. And really, we do have that choice. And if you've got to the end of this video and you're still watching, then you know that you have this choice. And I'm feeling really positive that by moving through it and working through it, you're going to find yourself in a better place. Friends, thank you so much for being here. Please leave me a message down below, leave me a comment. Support other people always really helps. And again, that offer is out there. If you find you haven't got someone to talk to, or you just need another opinion, please drop me a line. You can get me through the website, and we can chat and we can do a session and see what you're dealing with. Please like, please subscribe, please share the video if you think it's useful, and thank you so much for letting me be a part of your journey and for spending some time with me today. I will talk to you very soon.